Hello, have you ever thought about how much money you should give to your church or charitable organization? We're going to talk about that today and get into some Bible truths about giving. Hey, I'm Tim Kiser. Thank you for stopping by the Prophet Dare. On this channel, we're reimagining stewardship. We believe it's much more than giving, although giving is a large part of it, but there's much more to it than that. And today we happen to talk about giving. So I firmly believe that anybody can win at wealth without losing their soul if they just practice a few proven strategies and tactics and develop some behaviors, and it's quite possible. And I want to help, so that's why we're here today. So let's talk about it. So giving to your church, how much should you give? I thought about this the other day because there's a lot of ideas out there, and it's kind of three things I thought of. Do you tip the church? Do you tithe to the church? Or do you totally surrender your money to the church? So let's talk about each of those briefly, those three things. Tipping the church. So there are people out there who don't really have a systematic, disciplined manner of giving. And they might go to a church, and if things are going right, they went to a Christmas play or an Easter play or some kind of cantata. Is that what you call it, cantata? Choir came out, and they're like, oh, that was pretty entertaining. And, they decide to give, a few bucks to that. And that's almost like a performance-based thing. As long as the preacher's doing what I think he should do and things are smooth and no one's rocking the boat, I might just give. And it's more of a manipulative manner. I don't want to say the tip is less than a tithe, and we'll get to the tithe in a second. But it's not the amount that one gives on the tipping concept. It's the motivation behind it. So if we are thinking about giving, again, based on performance, things are going well. Hey, we have a youth ministry and our kids are having fun at the youth ministry, so we should probably give some money. That's more of a tipping mentality. And I can't see anywhere in the Bible where that's where that's supported, because if that was the case, the Apostle Paul would never have raised any money, because he was always poking the bear, so to speak, with his letters and his sermons. So we don't want to tip. And if that's you, I'm asking you to reconsider that concept, to just maybe do a shift in your heart, talk to God about it, and let him work in your heart. So the second one, we have tipping. Let's go to tithing a second. And I'll probably talk about tithing a lot on this channel, just because I think it's something that needs a lot of discussion. About half the church, half the body of Christ right now is split. Split between tithing is something we should do today, and tithing is something that went away in the Old Testament. So tithing, just for to define terms here, the churches who teach tithing are saying that a person should give 10% of their income to the church on a regular basis. So if they make $1,000, then $100 belongs to the church, and that's just a real simple definition. That's kind of what is being taught. Now there's some problems with that idea. For one, the tithe in the Old Testament, if you look in Leviticus and you look in Deuteronomy, you look in Malachi, those are the scriptures that people use primarily. The tithe was always food. It was grain, it was fruits and vegetables, and it was livestock. And the people who tithe were farmers or ranchers. And I said it before, and I take heat for it, but I mean, I'm just basing on what I read in the Bible. I don't do theology by folklore, at least the best of my abilities. There's not an example where someone brought money as a tithe to the temple. Now, people use Abraham and say he tithed 10% to Melchizedek. That was a very special situation where he went to war and he took war spoil and gave 10% to Melchizedek and 90% to the other kings of the area. He didn't keep any of it. So we're not asking people to give it all, not in most situations. So there's that one. But the tithe, the seed of the ground, every 10th animal, and poor farmers, let's go with my argument that it was a farmer situation. Say if you had sheep or cows, I guess is some of the animals they would keep in the Old Testament. Let's say sheep, goats. If you had 9, you didn't tithe because you didn't have a 10th one. So poor farmers didn't tithe. I don't believe Peter tithed as a fisherman. I don't believe John tithed as a fisherman. I don't believe Jesus tithed as a carpenter. I don't believe Matthew tithed as a tax collector. All the jobs I can think of in the Bible that we hear of, I don't believe these people tithe. I believe it was reserved for the farming communities. So, but then also it was an Old Testament thing. So now, let's say you are a farmer. Should you tithe? What are you going to bring your apples to the church? Preacher's going to think you're crazy. Plus, he's not a Levite. He cannot receive the tithe biblically. So even then, I believe when the temple was destroyed, when Jesus resurrected, it was obvious that there was a change in the way the church moved. However, when the temple was destroyed in what was that, 70 AD, 60, I don't know, sometime, 70 AD, I think it was, when the temple was destroyed, the Levitical priesthood was decimated, was absolutely abolished. There was no one who was qualified to receive a tithe, and there was no temple to take the tithe. Plus, the ground of Israel was considered holy, and the tithe only came from that ground. So there's a lot of problems with this idea of taking that concept of taking food, bringing food and crops to the temple, and all of a sudden, poof, let's magically make it money now because we say they were an agrarian society and we're not. Well, that still does not logically follow. So we really should resolve this issue where we're not putting an overly legalistic requirement on people. Think about the Council of Jerusalem, and they said, what should we tell these new believers that aren't Jewish? What do we tell them that they must do? I think this is Acts 15. What kind of stuff they still need to do that we believe in? And they're like, don't eat food that was sacrificed to idols and keep yourselves pure of sexual immorality. That had been a divine time for the disciples, the apostles, to all of a sudden impose the tithing mandate that some people still think is valid. It's not. Now, having said that, I would never discourage a person or a family from giving 10% of their income to their church. It's, nice round numbers, easy to remember. The math is simple. But let's not think that we're going to get something special because what we're trying to do, if we're trying to be made righteous by the law, we must keep the whole law. So let's be really cautious, because Ephesians 2 tells us that we're saved by grace through faith. It's not of our own works, lest anyone should boast. And if we're actually putting a legal mandate on someone saying that, yeah, Jesus paid the price and it's finished, but you still have some dues to pay and it equals 10%, we're getting some really sketchy theological territory. And I don't personally want to tell people that. Again, I don't want to discourage anybody from giving, but let's not make it a heaven or hell issue, or you're cursed if you don't issue. That's pretty scary too, when Jesus didn't do it. Now, they said, well, Jesus talked about tithing. We talked about mint, anise, and cumin in Matthew 23. He did. But I think he was actually kind of like sticking it to the teachers of the law, because they were so legalistic about their tithing that they actually would take part of their mint plant and run it to the temple at that time and say, here's my tithe. Here's 3 leaves. I had 30. Here's 3, And I think he was actually just kind of poking them, So anyway, you can sometimes read the Bible like that, and Jesus had some sarcasm in his tone and some hyperbole in his preaching as well. So anyway, so tithe, should we give 10%? So that 10% is a false anchor, right? It makes it really difficult for some people who will never be able to make that 10%, and people who should give 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 100% sometimes. They'll like, well, I already did my duty. I'm good. I'm legally good. I shouldn't have to do any more. And if I do anything more, boo, it's special, and I'm giving an offering now, and I should get lots of return for that. It sends a really bad message for the heart of our giving. So that tipping, tithing, how about total surrender? This is where I believe we should be in, is that everything we have in our possession belongs to God. He has given us not authority, kind of like the responsibility to manage his money. And I believe he expects us to manage it according to how he would. And I love the parable of the unjust steward in Luke 16, where he tells this crazy story of this bad manager, and he's kind of unethical. And then the manager comes back, or the owner comes back and says, tell me about this. I'm going to fire you. And he, Then he kind of like, oh, that was a pretty smart plan. You gave away half my income. And then Jesus, like in verse 9, said, but I say unto you, make friends of yourself of wealth, worldly wealth. And he is basically he's giving us permission in this parable, I believe, giving us permission to actually be very generous. Probably more than we think so. More than that false anchor of just the 10%. However, if you're totally surrendered and your finances are a wreck and you have debt up to your eyeballs and you're having problems making your house payment, your rent payment, you hear a beeping truck outside, you think someone's going to repo your car. I mean, some of us have been there before. We understand this stuff. And you give a couple dollars, you are totally surrendered. You are giving a well above and beyond your means. And so you don't have to give a certain dollar amount. I mean, if you're, I've heard a stat the other day, it's like 25% of the people who make over $150,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck. So it's not always more money answers the question. Defenses win championships too. But it's important for us to totally surrender and allow God's peace to kind of direct our path when it comes to giving. You might get an unction to give. I mean, I'm really systematic in mine. I'm probably maybe too systematic. My wife and I will spend some time over the next month or two talking about our giving for next year, and then we're gonna give. And it's grace. Grace for giving is harder than law. If all you had to do is give 10%, that'd be really easy. It'd be really easy. But I'm telling you, it's much more challenging when you actually pray and you're asking God to guide your heart on how to give. And what if he asks you, what if you feel impressed to give 25% of your income? And 10 is like what in your mind you've always thought, well, 10 is just the maximum I need to give. And all of a sudden now you're kind of like, now I have to like be uncomfortable. I'm gonna have to give more than what I thought was necessary. But there's plenty of examples in the Bible where giving was very extravagant. And I believe we're at that point, a total financial surrender. We don't tip. We don't tithe, which is just giving 10%, but we are committed to absolute total financial surrender, practicing radical generosity, giving, and let's not say this. I want to be clear that it's not about giving till it hurts or trying to outgive God. Those are man-made phrases that really have no business in the body of Christ. We give according to 2 Corinthians 9, where it says we give as God has purposed in our heart, as we purposed in our heart, that we give not reluctantly, not out of compulsion. God loves cheerful givers. And then we understand that we're making friends in high places. I think about it all the time, and we have opportunities to give, and we love giving globally, and heaven's going to be forever. And we have friends, we've given to some of our people that have been missionaries in Haiti and Guatemala and Cuba, and now we're supporting some churches in Ukraine that people are having problems even just getting food. And then I'll get to spend a lot of time. I mean, and it's not the amount. It's not the amount. Jesus never said you must give $1 billion. You don't have to have your name on the side of a building to be important when it comes to giving. It's simply as that I might meet somebody in heaven from Ukraine or from Haiti. There was a kid in Haiti who was on a bike accident. And it's like he had a compound fracture and his bone was sticking out. And we had some people from our church at the time. They were there on a medical mission trip, and this kid was part of that community where they were at. And they don't have like medical systems like we have in the States or Canada or where you might be, listening. And it's like all private, and it's, expensive, and it's like a lot of money. And this kid's like, well, if they don't fix his leg, he's probably going to get his leg amputated. It's a kid's a kid. And they just made a quick phone call to the church. The church sent out the thing, and we had the money to that hospital, and the kid got his leg bandaged up and was improving, right? So who knows? Maybe I'll get to talk to some kid from Haiti in heaven someday. I got a friend in high places that, it's eternal treasures, talking about that and just the whole thing and how God worked through that, right? So we're totally surrendering our finances to him. We're not tipping, we're not tithing, we're giving radically, and we're making friends in high places. So that's it. That's what I want to chat with you today about today. I say it right. So thank you for stopping by. Hopefully this video has added some value to your life. If this kind of thing is your thing, please like, subscribe, comment this stuff. We're just starting out in the channel, in the video channel, and here on YouTube, and it takes a while to get some traction. And if you would like to read articles, my website, The Prophet Deer, has hundreds of articles. Most of them are finance based, but there are some just basic Bible stuff in there too. And I would love to have you bang around there a little bit and sign up, and you might get some, sign up for some things that pop up there. So blessings to you, blessings to your family, and may God's grace come upon you, overtake you, overwhelm you, and may you be a blessing to your church family. See you soon.